Is there a mic on the thing there? I mean, it's
okay, so you have the roll call and the meeting is begun. So I assume we have no citizens petitions. We have nobody online still. One participant, I assume, us. Okay. So we're on to approval of the minutes.
move the approved minutes.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. So they're approved unanimously. I assume there's no communications and bills, consultant reports, changes to sewer use, attorney's reports, but Greg will tell me as part of the public director's report we need.
Public Works Director's report. So we had the equipment operator started yesterday.
Great.
So as far as the assistant director, we're fully staffed now. Did receive check with HR today, 7 applicants from the assistant director.
Oh.
Somebody over that. We did want to pass out, these are some brochures that will be going out. They went out in the commercial accounts. We got one to mailed out to all the residential about putting lights and grease and everything down the street.
I have 50 of them at my desk.
If you want more,
I'm good.
Would you like one?
We got ours in our commercial.
There you go.
Go ahead, open it up. You know about it? I said, yeah.
hopefully the little education will go along with it. All that for go into the utility report.
Or
But if there's another chance to talk to Harry, I noticed that the nitrogen is up quite a bit. A lot of that's due to the temperatures and wet weather. So hopefully that'll come down, so our average will be less than 153. Go primary clarifier. That design is all ready to go. It is in the upcoming CIP, so we'll get that out to bid soon. A generator down at the treatment plant, it's a replacement generator. It's supposed to be starting in May. Generator will be coming in there in July. It seems they're probably a year or so lead time. A year ago. It's crazy. Motor cold pump station renovations, we reviewed, before Jeff left to review our comments with the engineers. They're revising plans and specs. But we do need to get a wetlands permit from our own wetlands agency to do some, within 100 feet of the pump station, and since we have temporary bypass pumps, we get a permit for that. So we're working on that. Hopefully get this thing out to bid soon. Same as to the Burgess Park, we reviewed the plans with the engineer, and that also is a record. One project that's not on here is the jockey pump. Is the effluent pump station is a smaller pump. And it was during the low flow conditions. We have one now, but backup. So we started designing that.
okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? I don't have a chairman's report, so we're on to old business and the update on Beard and Mystic Cheese. But before we do that, let's go around and introduce ourselves, because some of us have met before and some of us haven't. So I'm Hugh Barton, I'm the chair of the WPCA.
I'm Laura Ballard, I'm a member.
Dan Smith, member.
Melissa, I work for water pollution.
Greg Campbell, Director of Public Works.
John Worsbicky, a member. Brian Sisella, managing member of the Municipal. Floor mopper, cheesemaker.
Exactly.
That's added a number of those.
I'm Johanna and I run the office.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Yeah, so Brian had reached out to me today, a couple weeks ago after our last meeting, and expressed interest in coming in and talking to everybody. And I know we talked about coming in the May meeting, but I said it's fine. I don't have to come in sooner than later, so. Because I had gone through, kind of done an update on what has been going on out there. The Mystic Cheese, we'll just focus on them first. Did get their ARPA work proposal approved, which is for the wave pumping and removal system, which they've installed, and next week it's all operational.
It is at this point, yeah.
So now they're hauling their separated way to nearby farms and the bioreactor facility. But I also noticed as part of the application that they were going to be providing us monthly testing results. And the outlet, they have a 2,000 gallon ice truck up there. So interested to hear.
Yeah, we're about to.
Yeah,
we're about to start that. I put together just a few slides on presentations, just because it's like talking about some stuff sometimes and then seeing what it actually looks like, or it can be different things. So I'll kind of stand here and try to hold the laptop just so you can kind of see what it is we do. So this is what it looks like when milk actually comes to our factory. See this gray tote on the back of a pickup truck that contains 200 gallons of milk. That's about what we process in a day. We rarely go over that. And we do that 1 week, twice a week, and then the opposing week, we do that 3 times a week. So we don't process a ton of milk. We're not a huge cheesemaker. The milk is weighed and measured at the farm, and that's controlled by the FDA and the state. They give us these little tickets. And then this is kind of like what the effluent was identified as, the stuff that we didn't want to put down the drain anymore. But just to see what it looks like for you guys, after we make cheese, we discharge our whey, which goes down a slide. This is the green, yellow liquid is the whey, and the solids, which is a little cheese curd, the white line up and back. That's just what it looks like. So that's our effluent. And it's generally like, we extract only about like 30% of the solid in all of that milk. So most of it is liquid discharge. And then once all that whey is gone, it actually looks like cheese. So that's what the cheese part looks like. So all the whey is drained off, and then it becomes cheese. So this part actually doesn't go down the drain because that's how I stay in business. And then it actually looks like that. That's what it does. It comes together as one piece of cheese. So the project that we proposed was to capture the whey. So this is the part of the process. So we have the vat tipping, that little collection device, and then the pump, and you'll see me walking to the back hallway. In the back hallway there, I'll zoom in, and that's the whey being pumped into a tote. So we are pumping off all of that effluent now and collecting it in a single source. And then that eventually gets filled up into these multiple totes. So this is what we got over the last 2 weeks. So these 3 containers are about 900 gallons worth of effluent over 6 days worth of our production. Since we don't make every day, we collect it slowly. And then once we have 4 of these, between myself and the neighbors, Beard Brewing, in any combination, could be 1 from me, 3 from him, whatever. We have a service that comes called Remix Organics, and they come and pick up the effluent and they take it to a methane digester so that it doesn't go down the drain anymore. So that's kind of what it looks like. I thought it would be helpful just for you guys to kind of see what the project actually did. With the $20,000 that the grant gave us, $12,000 alone was for the pump, which it seems crazy. But that's what things cost, and the time to get the equipment, getting providers into, actually, I think Johanna and I were comparing, I think, 2 months to get the electrician in
Yeah.
alone.
So we waited,
Yeah,
just to get on the schedule.
Yeah.
In the world. Yeah.
and then we had
And
to
the summer wasn't
actually,
far behind.
No. and then we had to commission the system, which took an extended amount of time because we have to prove all of the hoses and things in the system can be fully cleaned. And that's done by the state of Connecticut, who's contracted by the FDA. So they have to go in there, we test with something called an ATP swab, and we have to swab inside of the hoses to make sure that there's no protein residues left to be considered 100% clean. So it's just one thing to hook up a pump and start pushing stuff through a hose, but it's another for the Food and Drug Administration for them to sanction what it is you do. And it seems simple, but it's in our environment, cheese is one of the most regulated foods in America, surprisingly, even more so than pharmaceutical. We see a federal agent twice a year, and they stay with us up to 7 days. And they just follow you around the building, seeing what it is you do all day. It's a weird way to exist. And then the state, on top of that, we see the state, every month. So I don't think I made enough copies for everyone, but I'll hand this out this week. You can share? All right. I don't even know if you want to see it. Put that another one here. So we ran some trials just to see the efficiency of the system over the course of 3 days last week. 324, 326, and 328. So the amount of milk that we took in gallons, 207.83, 215 gallons, 208 gallons. The amount of whey we pumped off, which we measure on those plastic containers that I showed you in the back of the video, 127 gallons, 135, 129, which leaves the weight of the whey that was pumped out. And then we have the remaining weight, which is left over. So we know that we took in X amount of milk. We know we pumped off X amount of whey, and that leaves us with a certain amount of weight. Now, we took every batch of cheese that we tested, we weighed each piece of cheese before it went into our cheese cave, because cheese dehydrates significantly to the air as it ripens. So initially we had about 729, 725, 720 pounds. By the time it dehydrates, which that's weight that doesn't go down the drain, then you end up with only about 270, 280, 270 pounds of cheese. Now, we have the weight difference shown through dehydration, and then that also shows the pounds of weight that we captured from the whey, which is what's left over. So if we didn't capture, if we had 729 pounds of cheese and we ended up with 273, we have the weight difference, lost dehydration, 149, 145, 145. That shows me that I have 300 pounds of whey, 290 pounds of whey, and 296 pounds of whey. Each gallon of whey weighs 8.33 pounds. We know this because we've weighed hundreds of different points to try and figure out where the efficiency is.
You weighed the whey?
We weighed the whey. It really is a lot of whey puns in our background, especially with this project. So if we divide the 300, the 290, and the 296 by 8.33, that shows me that I'm still putting down the drain 36 gallons, 34 gallons, 35 gallons. So for the total week, we put down about 105 gallons worth of effluent. So we're missing about 17, 18, 16%, somewhere in that range per batch is what I'm not able to capture. We know exactly when this happens because when we're tipping that cheese out onto the table, the device that tips over doesn't allow us to get on all four sides. One side is tipped. So when we pull the table away, the cheese is not done draining. It still fills up a few buckets after that initial flood of whey that comes out. So I know exactly where it is I'm missing, and we're trying to solve the problem of collecting those 30 to 40 gallons worth of whey that are still causing us problems to go down the drain. But overall, with tipping the vat, getting that first initial slug of whey out, we're somewhere in the 80% reduction from where we were prior to starting this project, which I think is pretty decent. obviously, if we can get the remaining 30 to 40 gallons, that's going to help out everybody in the long run. It's stuff that you don't have going down the drain that's clogging up the systems that you guys have. But I think for me, I'm quite happy to see the results of efficiency of capturing the way, pumping it out, and getting it out of the system. Because prior to that, we weren't, prior to the grant having the project, we weren't doing these things. So the town was absorbing all of that, all of those gallons away. So the biggest challenge for us with the project has been, one, the commissioning, and then two, lining up the suppliers that take the effluent away. We had lined up an initial one back in, we started pumping in January, and then they stopped service to our area. So we had to wait for a new one to come online. And it's tricky because the industry of collecting this effluent is like starting to bubble up because of committees like yourself who are interested in keeping, effluent out of the system. Businesses like ours and food production, restaurants, everybody's under sort of a gun to remove effluent stream from, the water, which we all should. That's the right thing to do. So, I think there's more and more of these players coming online as far as like places to get rid of effluent. Ours, this new one, Remix Organics, is starting service to our area. They're in Rhode Island. They're coming now whenever we have the 4 totes, and then they purchased a pump truck so they can come right to our facility and pump out those plastic totes rather than transporting them in the back of the truck. So, I mean, I think it's going well. I think we've identified some of the issues where we can improve. If I can get that extra 100 gallons worth of effluent, or at least even half of that, we'll be down to 50 or 60 gallons of the heavy effluent that we have. I mean, we're a cheese factory, so if you test our drains, if there's a drop of milk, the DOD looks high. But I think I have enough proof for myself of how much I'm pumping out of the drain that's not going down the drain, and I'm pumping into these plastic totes to know that I have at least an 80% reduction as of today. What happens when we don't have service to our area, like when we lost our contractor who initially was servicing us, the wave ends up going back down the drain. And so what we're finding after just 4 months doing this, is we probably need to find 2 places to work with so we can have 2 vendors overlapping, so I can make sure that we don't have a break in service. Because we know that Harold was out doing testing last week, and we hadn't yet pumped our grease trap. If I take a cup of whey and I pour it into our 2,000-gallon grease trap, that whey slowly dilutes over time. It's not like it goes in and then is out the next day. It stays in there. So the BODs and the CODs are going to stay high until I pump it out again. So I don't want to have those breaks in service where then it looks like we're not doing anything at all. I mean, we have enough proof that we're trying to do the right thing and getting the way out and pumping it, but I don't want those breaks in service. So again, we've identified what it is we need to do, which is probably have 2 or even 3 providers to help haul away the effluent. So as far as the testing goes, we just got our grease trap pumped on the 3rd. So now we're going to start the weekly testing because we have full service provider again, and now we have a clean grease trap. So I can start emailing those to you, or however you want, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. And then as far as we also would really like at some point to, when the guys are testing on the street, to pull a simultaneous sample from the grease trap outflow versus what's at the street. We don't often know when they're coming, which is probably by design. But it would be helpful. It would be helpful for us to at least have a comparison sample, because Lord knows we've had those pipes snake before, and they have buildup in them, of course. So I kind of want to see what the difference is between the street reading. Not that I'm trying to usurp the readings and get away. I just want to take one sample here, and then you guys have one sample on the road, so I can just have a rough idea of what it is. I'm not asking But now that I've got a good system in place, I kind of want to see where that 110 gallons a week is putting me. And if I can narrow it down to another 30 or 40 gallons, is that going to help me get further down on my numbers? Or am I with the system that we put in place, am I at my limits? And then that's going to help me understand kind of where we fall with the town and the billing cycles for CODs and DODs, and what's possible for us. Because the rates at the higher, thing, if the project didn't work for us, we definitely can't afford those high commercial rates. I mean, we've even gotten, as part of the project, we've re-examined all of our water usage just to see how conservative we can be. We were averaging close to 20,000 gallons a month, and we're down to 10,000 gallons at our last bill. So we've even cut our water significantly, trying to figure out ways we can wash things better, ways we can cut back on rinsing things better. So we're trying to train the team, to heaven knows I go crazy, trying to get everybody to not waste water.
Be as efficient as possible.
To be as efficient
With
as
our
possible. Yeah, we've switched to some environmentally friendly chemicals for washing our equipment that require a single cycle of cleaning. Often in dairy and even beer and stuff like that, we have to wash with a soap first and then an acid, and then we sanitize. And in between that, you have to rinse all of those cycles out. So we've switched the whole factory over to a single cycle cleaner that takes care of what the cleaning of an acid and a caustic would do. And that's enabled us to nearly half our water usage in the plant. So, I mean, I want you guys to know that we're not taking it lightly. It's been a slow start. I will 1000% own it, admit that. But I am trying my best to really get the effluent down and help out to meet the requirements of the town. I don't want you guys to think that we're just messing around out there. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces. It's a lot of retraining for staff who have done things one way for a very long time. When you tell them we have to now hook up pipes and pumps and pump things and move the way around, it adds a whole element of their workday that they weren't accustomed to doing.
Sure.
And so that's another part of it. It's just changing the company approach to water usage, what goes down the drain, making sure that cheese doesn't go down the drain if it falls on the floor. Everyone's now getting mindful and trying to get that, into their work day and their mindset about how they handle themselves in the factory. So, is there any questions? And I know you guys have been doing some testing, and I'd love to see a copy of that if it's available. I know. I don't know.
Some testing that looks like it actually was, they did some testing with the beer sampling vehicle, and that was pretty high.
Yeah. I don't know what
On
is.
the street it was low, but it was a beer. We haven't done enough to really.
Yeah. I think that sampling for our food production, there are moments when it's going to be high no matter what, just because it's the nature of food. If somebody drops something on the floor or a cup of whey spills and the sampler has to be going off at that very second, it's going to be high. That would happen if you guys go to a restaurant, if you go to Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, or a place that washes dishes during busy hours, their BODs and CODs are going to be off the charts. I don't know if you guys test restaurants or anything like that. But...
So the one thing is, I totally understand what you're saying, but I believe the samples we talked about last month were like collected over 20 hours, right? I think that's in the minutes, actually.
But see, what I'm interested in looking at is, I want to see how the composites are being formed.
Right, so this is one of the things I guess we need to understand also about, again, I don't know how you are planning on doing your sampling, but obviously, even to make the comparison that you suggested, which I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to do to help both you and us understand, what is contributing to the levels that are being measured there. But then we have to worry about that the samples are being collected in a consistent manner, because if you're collecting it over 1 hour and we're collecting it over 20 hours,
Right.
you know, they represent two totally different things.
That's part of my understanding is of information that I'm looking for is I'm trying to paint a picture like of your composite sample. Because I know what happens in the factory minute by minute. We run a process by a clock essentially when we make cheese. So I know when the milk comes, what steps are afterwards and what times they take place. So I know when the potential for effluent to even go down the drain would be. So I'm trying to figure out what the composite samples show. So I can paint a picture of what it looks like in the factory and match that up to understand where it is we can also improve. If you guys are saying consistently between 8 and 10 a.m., you're seeing high effluent, but then afterwards it might be lower. I understand that from 8 to 10, we're doing something intensive, and maybe that's during the part where we're tipping the whey, and I can match that up. But sometimes we're not in operation at all when you guys are out there testing, so I'm curious what those look like as well. Sometimes we see the truck out there on a day when we're not making cheese and we're not cleaning, and we're just having a knife and a cutting board and we're cutting cheese to sell to customers. There's not a drop going down the drain. I don't know what those samples look like, but are they public record, or I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I could have Barry.
Yeah. Okay.
Share with you.
Yeah, like I said, it's only in the interest of us understanding what the samples look like. I want to know if it lines up with what we're doing. If it doesn't, why is it getting high? And then I can try and figure out where it's coming from in our process and why it's triggering those results at that time.
So, anybody have questions? Or I will just say I really appreciate your presentation. I appreciate the information you've just provided us. And I also appreciate your expression of interest to work with us to solve the problem. You know, to me, that's been sort of the goal here rather than to slap high monetary charges on you all, is let's figure out what's going on, what needs to be done in order for it not to be a problem and be economically manageable for you as well as us, etc. So I really appreciate what you've said tonight. And so I think, you know, one of the things, so you know, is there have been so far relatively few samples that have been taken for a variety of reasons. Obviously, there were the samples, what, 2 years ago now, maybe even 3.
4 years ago.
4. You know, that there were the original very high samples, and there was one sample sometime after that that was somewhat lower. So, you know, one of the things we struggle with is, you know, not having a lot of data, but also that, you know, even with the beard manhole installed, that means when we take the sample in the street, that's the combined effluent. You know, the samples from the beard manhole will tell us about beard. And up until your description of this sampling from the grease trap, I hadn't realized that we had any ability to get samples for you all independent of, you know, and so clearly, you know, making sure that we collect samples. Another thing I would worry about is, and I don't know that much about, you know far more than I about measuring VOD and COD, but, you know, for an awful lot of things coming out of both the pharmaceutical industry and the toxicology, environmental toxicology, you know, which lab you send things to and which analysis method they use, et cetera, can have huge impacts on the results. And I don't know how much that's an issue for VOD and COD, but I think that's another thing we need to try to work through, because if we're sending them to one lab and you're sending them to another lab, you know, oftentimes what will be done is to send, some sample to both labs and
Mhm.
make sure you're getting the same answer from both labs.
Yeah.
And not just one sample, but, 10 different samples,
Yeah.
so you get the same answers from the two labs.
We were gonna work with the
People,
old favorite. I don't know where, do you guys do it in-house? Like, like,
Phoenix.
you know,
Manchester.
where is
Manchester.
Manchester? Do they come pick up or do you guys drive up? No, can't drive.
No, they come to pick
You
it
know?
up.
Oh, all right. That might be helpful if I can get a hold of them and they actually pick up. We were gonna go down to Old Saybrook and drop off. Huh? Sure.
I did have to admit
please, go ahead.
just so that I can better understand it in the office part of it. When you get our numbers, what other companies or restaurants, what do you gauge our numbers against? Who else are you testing for? And what time of day? I'm just curious, we have obviously a very big project and it's very thorough down to 82%. So I'm wondering how much, or the other businesses, how much they get tested, are they tested? And how are we compared to their numbers as well? We have besides beers, which is local to us, we have like car washes, we have, restaurants that are, self-go, pick up, or they have dishes. I'm just wondering what the bell curve is as to who we're gauged against and what the playing field is as far as like the highs and the lows.
So we probably have several people who will comment, but let me just start with this. At one level, you're not gauged against anybody else in the sense that the ordinance that Groton has a formula for calculating this charge, the industrial charge. And that, we've talked about some revision to that, and we're in the process of revising a whole bunch of things in the ordinance, so that hasn't happened yet. But that would apply, sort of regardless. In other words, if some other company is lower or higher, or whether they're doing similar or different, that's just the formula that's used for calculating the charges. So in that sense, there's no comparison. Now, your question is obviously sort of relevant in the sense of, how we know, who's being measured, or that effluent would even fit in that category. Car washes comes up frequently because there are so many of them, and they have fairly elaborate recycling systems for their water, because otherwise their water usage would be so ridiculously high. But so I think probably you want to comment on?
Yeah, I was just gonna say about car washes, they have oil water separators and then recycle systems, and, their effluent is not really helpful to a treatment plant, so, and like you said, their water usage would be through the roof, so, they're not really the same. Restaurants are pretty, they're about, Department of Public Health says it's about 30 gallons per day per seat, so it's not like, they're not using that much water where they could trigger, the ordinance to come into effect. And they all have.
Is there a water limit for the ordinance to come into effect? I haven't read it. I'm just curious.
Well, Deep has a 5,000 gallon per day.
Yeah.
So anything under that or over that would be a miscellaneous industrial. They have a general permit.
So we're way under that at 10,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other
No, I think you guys
comment?
pretty much. It is that industrial surcharge form too.
Yeah.
Right, and the ordinance and that formula are from, 1980 something or other, I think. But it was based on kind of the idea that how the waste streams compared to what you would expect out of residential. That's what drives that formula calculation is, you know, that if you have waste streams that are substantially higher than sort of what you would be getting regular residential use.
And how does the testing work? Does the gentleman that came out to does he do all the other locations as well as the people that are in that ordinance?
So we have at least one other company that essentially does what, you know, you're planning on doing for, in other words, they have a sampling location within the facility and do the testing. I don't know how much other testing moved beyond the testing. Somehow, the Beard Mystic Cheese situation came onto the radar, and I'm not 100% sure how that even happened, but that led to a certain focus on, you know, testing around that, particularly once the levels that were observed were so.
So there's other companies that are using that much water that are getting that surcharge, or we're just getting tested because we were already on the radar and no one else gets tested.
I don't know how it works. Well, we're just trying to, I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
no, it's like, you said, it's like, we had that 4 years ago, and we had a big dump at the plant, and we traced it all back to
The beer.
litter trash, annual beers. And then we started sampling the manhole up there, and like, wow, these are really super high, so that's why we wanted to work with you guys.
Okay.
And we couldn't determine if it's, you know, 50/50 or if it was mostly beer.
Right, because we don't have.
We don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, if we get more sampling going forward, we'll be able to determine that. And
Yeah.
maybe, you know, if you guys show that sample after sample, you're so far below, you know, I know the surcharge.
Yeah. Hopefully we
It
can.
should kind of go away.
I'm hoping with, you know, with just what we're doing, we can establish a baseline and try and like beat it. I'm gonna try and make it a game. Johanna knows when I get my sights set on something.
Oh, here we go.
Vitamin cheese.
Right.
In the pursuit of that only accepted people.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, we're starting at a really good place, and if we can keep it up and try and figure out how to get these extra gallons, it's gonna help us. Where that's gonna put us in the up or down of the current ordinance, I don't yet know, but over the next few months, we'll find out, and see where it goes.
So I did look at the minutes. They do say it was a 20-hour sample.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Harry always does 20 hours or, you know, there may be sort of things that lead it to be a little shorter or a little longer,
Of course, yeah.
you know, depending on when people can get over there or whatever. It probably would make sense for Harry and them to talk, because it really isn't going to be uninterpretable if you collect, you know, a 2-hour sample during the time period when you have the highest level, you know, as compared to, you know, the sample that we're collecting. That's just not gonna.
Because you guys have those auto dipper, I've seen it out in he showed it to me once. It like takes a sample every, I think you said a timer on it or something.
15 minutes, I think.
Yeah, something like that. It spins around and gets another sample.
A couple hundred mils every 15 minutes. You can set it for whatever, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so then that'll give you, you know, a snapshot of, you know, the entire period versus just a grab sample.
Yeah. Okay. So we gotta figure out how to, I mean, my grab sample, I don't know if I can mount one of those. I'll ask the guys at the laboratory if they know how I can mount one or set something up. the outflow of the grease trap, it's subterranean like the other samples. And it does have one common point, so I wouldn't see why we couldn't mount one of those thingies in the drain.
So grease trap outside the building?
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's right out, it's literally right, the beard manhole is here and it's there. It's literally right next to it, yeah. So I'll have to see. I don't know enough about the devices. Maybe he can show me. Yeah. What's the best way to get a hold of Harold? Just email him? Have his
Yeah.
Email.
Yeah, if you want to send I can see.
Yeah. Then I can ask for the sample results, which would be super helpful. And then we can compare it to our production schedule to see if we're in production, out of production, just to try and make base sense of it.
Sure.
And then now when we start to collect our samples, try and mimic what he's doing to try and get the most comparable results rather than the grab sample. And then we'll see how that works. If you'd like, we can come back next month. And I don't know, whatever you want to do.
Enough data.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably a few months.
Okay.
You know. But yeah, it does seem like some real communication and trying to coordinate, because otherwise the data is going to be so disparate that you really can't.
Yeah.
It won't help you and it won't help us.
Okay.
Right, and we want to make sure that it's as efficient as possible and that we are able to catch as most of it as possible.
Right. So
Which is the end goal for
the one
everybody.
thing, even as that's going on, I guess the one thought I have is, again, the formula is the formula. I think, I've forgotten exactly what the adjustment was that we had voted to implement that would somewhat reduce the charge. But, I think if you just took samples probably over a 20-hour or whatever,
Yeah.
24-hour, came up with a 24-hour average, and then get the BOD and COD, then you can run the calculation of the formula that's in the
Yeah.
ordinance. Because, again, if it comes out that it's essentially nothing as you are, then
I doubt that will be the case. But I mean, we're a food factory, and that is the reality of making
Right,
food.
right.
Is our numbers are going to be higher than a household or a business that makes widgets, on a factory line with no water.
Right, I've forgotten what it was. It was like 5 times or 3 times in the formula.
I know when we looked at our initial bill, the surcharges per month put us out of business.
Right.
I would just go find another job.
Right.
That's how serious those charges
Right.
are.
No,
Which is why we're trying our best.
Right.
Obviously, I don't want to start over and move to a different place and close my business down and unemploy everyone.
So, obviously an 80% decrease, is a substantial decrease now. Again, whether you need to, how sort of far you need to go in chasing after the remaining 100.
Yeah,
gallons.
and what's feasible for us to do.
Right, exactly. But that's where, again, just at least initially making, even if you're not yet sort of coordinated with Harry in terms of the sampling, getting some idea of what your current 24-hour average is and how does that calculate out, so, what happens if that's essentially due to this 100-gallon remaining, do you need to knock that down by half, or you need to knock it down by 99%? I was an environmental consultant, and one of the first projects I worked on was a paper and pulp mill in Minnesota, and the dioxin levels were a problem. And I went to the engineering staff and told them the dioxin levels were too high given the risk estimates. And they came back to me all excited a few weeks later. They had cut the dioxin levels, I've forgotten the exact numbers, but let's just say by, half. And I was like, or 2/3 or something. And I was like, oh, I didn't explain to you. The numbers are at least tenfold too high.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's why I'm suggesting, you collecting data that you can now and looking at the calculations, because again, if you need to knock your 100 gallons down to 50, that's one thing. If you need to knock it down to 1 gallon, that's
I'm never gonna do it.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, certainly helping your water reduction, if you have cut it in half, because that's the basis of your.
Of your
Of
surcharge.
the bill, yeah.
Of the bill to begin with, so
And
if you
we're-
put that down, you're already.
It will help us, yeah. We wanted to do it anyway, just because sometimes, it's a job, and if you have a hose in your hand, you sometimes forget that you pay for water, unless it's me with the hose, and I'm very efficient with it. But an average employee is just gonna, do the thing. But we've all tried to work on our habits of being more efficient at rinsing and switching to chemicals, even cleaning soaps that are free rinsing and easier to get, so we spend less water. And it's working. I mean, our bill, literally last month, our water usage almost cut in half when we implemented a lot of this stuff. So to go from nearly 20 average all the way down to 10, just by a concerted effort for the employees, switching chemicals, doing what we did, I mean, I think hopefully we're on the right track of getting the problem at least as low as I can possibly do within a reasonable. And then we can look at what that looks like for us as a company versus charges, and hopefully we end up somewhere in a decent spot, not out of business. But, it's, tariffs are tariffs right now, and we're all gonna, that's independent of the water usage altogether anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't want to take up any more
anything
time.
else?
I don't want to, I apologize. I probably took up.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Appreciate it. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
And,
Yes, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
I will touch base with Harold or.
Yeah, I'll
Harold.
give you a phone and touch base with him.
Okay.
Let him know what's up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet everybody.
Okay, so anything further on this item? Did we
Just
get-
beer, you asked what they did, they gave everybody, but obviously took the manhole and flow meter.
Right.
We have to do the sample. It's interesting, you said that, I guess they're working with beer to have someone come in, because part of them was just buy a trailer to haul the turds, so. Now they have an expensive trailer, just haul them.
Did you actually buy it?
Oh, I believe they must have, yeah. Because they were hauling for quite a while. They're doing practices for side streaming, so I don't know exactly.
I had a fantasy that it was going to be fun.
This is the, I sent this to you guys a while ago. Kind of interesting, this is written by an engineer. It's a case study of it, dog beer.
Oh,
and they-
There is gonna be a food waste facility being built in Preston.
Oh,
Right, I just.
Yeah, it's, got approved, so, that's something, they're gonna compost it. Interesting.
Well, and I just automatically assumed that was sort of solid food waste, but I don't know whether they.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're gonna take liquid or
Liquid or not.
not.
That's what food scraps.
Yeah, that's what I was
Whatever.
thinking. Right, yeah, that kind of
Liquid.
thing, right, that's what
was
I
this
was.
written? I can't remember. I remember seeing this, but before or after we met him.
Oh, this is written probably maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years
So
ago.
since we met.
Since, yeah, because it talks about you guys are here and what you're looking to do.
Okay, yep.
I'll try to get, there. And just, you know, do it.
So, so anyway, so sampling efforts are still on,
So,
nothing more results from that. Yeah, I think, you know, it would be good to have coordination between us and Mr. Cheese, but I also do think they have a path forward to go through what I was just suggesting, the sample. Good enough approximation. Where, but, okay, so we're done with that.
I'll set the start on the 15th of April.
Yep, all three companies that actually count, I have all of their information, so.
Okay, great. So, do we have any new business? So there's none here. If not, so our next meeting is May 13th. Let's see, May and June, we probably get into the rate or, yeah, don't we?
Yeah. I think we set
The hearing for June. Yeah, and so it's important to have quorums of those two meetings. I think Meredith couldn't come because of her recent surgery and she's still, but I'm assuming her recovery goes reasonably well. I bet she would be able to come.
I move we adjourn. Is that in order?
Yes. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
We haven't got a second.
Second.
Right. Well,
Aye.